Good afternoon. My name is Richter. She just said I'm a graduate student in the Human Factors program at the University of Houston, Clear Lake. Today I'll be presenting a study in which I started with my advisor, Dr. Sutherland, and my research partner, Maria Valladares. This is a project I started as an undergraduate student, and I continued as I became a graduate student. As automation becomes increasingly integrated into our daily lives, we wanted to study if changes in task type would influence decision to request advice. There's a large body of literature that has studied the interaction between humans and automated systems. In our search, we found that the higher the system is regarded, the perceived pedigree, results in an increase in reliance, the use of the system, and compliance following the system's advice. The perceived expertise of the system is significant when considering differences in perceived trust and reliability. If provided with the general option between a human and automated advisor, the individual will choose the human advisor. However, decision makers prefer expert sources overall. If the source is of novice expertise and they are presented with the choice of a novice human advisor or a novice automated system, the decision maker will choose automation. Similarly, in situations where there are high stakes, human provided advice results in higher levels of reliance and compliance. Given that stakes play a role on decision making, we decided to include resources and lives conditions to our research. Given this research, we felt it would be relevant to study if the context of the task causes a shift in automated reliance. For the purpose of this study, we chose to immerse participants in a video game environment called Search and Rescue. The main objective of the game is to send search and rescue teams to various zones in a city that has suffered an earthquake. The game is a multiple cue probability task in which participants were provided with 4 cues: the time of day the earthquake happened, the number of the buildings in each zone, the population of each zone, and the zone type. In this first picture of the game here, the player will click through the series of dialogue with the chief and the person in charge. You can see that here at the bottom. This is where they learn that the earthquake has taken place and what is expected of them in the game. On this next slide, the dialogue has been completed and the player can only select the projector button, and this was intentional so the participant would have to go to the next screen. This is where they are shown the time of day that the earthquake occurred, which is 1600, so 4 p.m. It changes every time that they do a new trial through the session. And also the different zone types that that you'll see in the map next. And it gives the information of the breakdown as far as how many people live in that zone or gallons of oil, whichever condition they are in. Once back here, the player can then select to turn on the map. And once on the map screen, the player can then click on those different zones and a box will pop up with the information that was on the projector screen. This will aid the player in selecting the best zone types. The player must decide to either send the drone, which requires 15 seconds to receive the data, or to choose the zones on their own. If the player selects to choose the drone, there's another box that pops up explaining that there is a time delay of 15 seconds. This is the same if they're in the human expert condition. Here you see the drone has made its recommendations. The player has the option to comply with the recommendations of the drone or choose the zones on their own. The zones, when selected, will turn green. The gray indicates unselected, and the white is the ones that have been discarded. The player must assign the 3 teams to be sent and then hit the Send Teams button. This is the results screen where the player can see what the best zones possible were, how they scored in comparison, and if they chose to request advice from the drone or the human expert, they will see how they compared as well. At this point, the player is placed in a penalty time delay that's proportionate to the number of lives saved. The max penalty is 2 minutes, which can be very frustrating for the players. The time delay serves as a consequence for the player's actions. Mistakes come at a cost. After the time delay, the player then cycles through as many trials as they can within 30 minutes. In order to determine whether there is something unique about this situation involving human lives that make us want recommendations from a human who understands the human condition, we created 4 versions of the game. In version 1, participants searched for and rescued survivors with the option of drone assistance. In version 2, they searched for and repaired oil spills with the option of drone assistance. In version 3, they searched for and rescued survivors with the option of assistance of a human expert. And finally, in version 4, they searched for and repaired oil spills with the option of assistance of a human expert. Participants were randomly assigned to play one of these 4 versions of the game. The data was collected during our university's data collection day. There was approximately 10 participants in the room during each session, all of whom were assigned to the same condition. The human expert was a confederate who was in the room with the participants at all times. Regardless of the source type, though, the game generated all of the advice given. The advice was programmed to be 80% accurate. This was achieved using a random number generator within the coding of the game. Participants primarily consisted of psychology graduate students enrolled in a research design and statistics course. Ages ranged from 21 to 47 and identified primarily as female. Data for the 5 participants was not recoverable from a single computer due to a technical error. However, it was across all conditions and does not alter the number of participants in each condition. 65 participants was analyzed, in which 5 participants always requested advice and 11 participants never requested advice. Of the 5 who always requested advice, 4 were in the drone and oil condition, 1 in the oil and expert condition. 11 participants who never requested advice, 5 were in the oil and expert condition, 4 in lives and expert condition, 1 in lives and drone, and 1 in oil and drone. For the purpose of the analyzing participant accuracy, those participants who always and never requested advice were dropped from the following analysis. By comparing participants' trial, we determined that the participant who requested advice achieved higher accuracy requested advice achieved higher accuracies than when they did not. For those 16 participants dropped, there was no comparison to determine their performance with or without advice accordingly. On the second analysis, we compared all participants' data because participants who always requested or did not request advice formed the extremes of the data set. The third analysis, those participants who never requested advice had no advice to comply with and thus were dropped from the analysis. Given that advice clearly has an impact on accuracy, the more it is complied with, the better they do. Therefore, players should have requested advice and followed it. Participants relied more on automated advice than on the human expert. There was no significant interaction between task type, the oil and lives, nor source type, human and automation. Once the advice was requested, participants were just as likely to use the advice across the board, no matter the condition. A possible explanation for these results may have stemmed from the fact that out of 40 participants in the expert condition, 9 never requested advice. These results contradict our original hypothesis that individuals would be more likely to consult the human expert as opposed to the drone. Possible implications of our results could be that society's attitude towards automated systems has become more favorable. We are known to be cognitive misers, as we are satisfied with the actions that use the least amount of effort. In the real-world application, individuals may be more likely to use tools such as automation to lighten their cognitive load. An understanding of what the system is may also impact compliance and reliance. There's a possibility that participants in the study had a mental misrepresentation of the drone providing the decision suggestions. One limitation of our study could have been explained by the tragedy of commons, given that one human expert was in the room with upwards of 10 participants at a time for each session. Considering the fact that this task was in a virtual environment, participants may have also undervalued the subjective nature of their task and regarded their decisions as unimportant. The perception of the confederate may have also influenced participants' likelihood to request his advice. It is likely they did not find them to match their schema of what an expert would look like. The term drone may have also led participants to believe that the automated system had information that the human expert did not, which could influence whether or not they used the system. In Dr. Sutherland's research lab, there are various iterations of the studies which involve search and rescue. Some modifications my research partner and I are considering for future research include involving having a team of experts as opposed to one confederate. This would eliminate the tragedy of the commons. Using descriptive terminology in order for participants to have a better understanding of the technologies being used, or incorporating a think aloud protocol with sessions being conducted individually. Altering one or some of the aspects of the game may provide different outcomes, which could result in a better understanding of automation, reliance, and compliance. Thank you for your time today. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Robin. Good job. And we actually have quite a lot of time for questions. We made up.
Hi, James Simpson, University of York. Quick question. I believe in the, I guess maybe this is kind of similar to the question we had in the previous talk. I think a number of participants had more female participants than male participants. I was just wondering if there was maybe, if you could comment on whether there was any, what effect maybe gender played on the degree of trust between these systems.
For our particular research, I can't speak for the last presenter. However, we have a certain demographic for our university, which is mostly female for the psychology department. And so we only had that pool to go from. We did not do any analysis that broke it down between genders, so we don't have any way of knowing if that played a role at all or anything like that.
I have a frequent frustration with trust studies that, and I'm not sure whether yours participates, but the frustration is that error is randomly generated. Mm-hmm. Percentage accuracy of an advice giving aid, whether it's yes. human or system, is randomly generated. Mm-hmm. Whereas systems and humans in the real world are rarely random in their error propagation, and are in fact, arguably, our entire mechanism for trust reliance mm-hmm. is about developing an accurate mental model of how and when the advice giver is going to be good and bad. So the general question is, how and when were advice givers correct or incorrect here, and was there anything for your participants to pick up on in that?
Okay, are you trying to ask that how we decided when to give them the wrong information, or
the right information?
Correct. For ours, we used a random number generator that was encoded into the game itself. So if they chose, the computer chose between 1 and 80, then they got the correct answer. If it chose between 81 to 100, then it generated an incorrect guess, so to speak. So the drone or the human expert would have suggested the wrong location for them to send the teams to. And we were just trying to look and see if whenever they finally got the wrong answer, if they chose to use the drone or human expert, if that would change their future, because most participants got 15 to 20 trials out of the 30 minutes, because it is a very fast-paced game. And so we were able to look over the data and see who was able to pick up on that, so to speak, and how it curved their future gameplay.
But I would expect mm-hmm. that because you framed this in a nice
yes.
earthquake scenario, oil mm-hmm. refinery survivors, you've encouraged an analysis of when and where drones versus human experts might have accurate knowledge of the correct or incorrect answer, mm-hmm. and it'd be really interesting to see what your talk aloud protocols have to say about why and when
yes.
Selections.
That's one of the things that we look to incorporate into our next, our follow-up actually, so thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Casey Dugan from IBM Research. I think maybe I just need a clarification because you talk a little bit about the terminology drone may have affected some of the decision making.
Sure.
So for the two setups for the life-saving versus the oil refinery. Can you say more what the participants were told about each of the scenarios?
At the beginning of the study, they are read a prompt that it kind of sets the stage for what they're walking into. And so they're told that they have the option of using a drone that they can send out over the city to survey the area, and it will tell them like where the most damage is, if it's oil spills, or if it's the lives where the most damage is in the highest populated areas. And so it kind of, whenever the results screen comes up that look like the grid, it'll give them a breakdown like, well, this zone 1, because of time of day, it was maybe like businesses, and so at 4 p.m. or 2 p.m., whatever it was, maybe that's more populated area. So it gives them cues that they can pick up on if they choose to use the drone or human expert.